like sparkle in his eye, and it's something probably all of you have seen in some individuals that are you just know there's something behind the face. And after about 10 minutes, he said, okay, that's interesting. And he started to walk away. And I couldn't let that happen. He didn't ask me for my, contact information. So I remember I grabbed his backpack and pulled him back and said, wait a minute, we've got to talk more. So he obliged and gave me his phone number, and we started meeting in a famous place, Buck's Cafe in Woodside, where Jerry Yang came up with Yahoo and a few other cool businesses started there. So we would meet there once a week. And Netflix was nothing like it is today. We were trying to be the Amazon of DVD at the time.
So the rest is history.
Yeah, but it really took about 2 years before anybody had heard of us, and even more years before anybody thought we would succeed. In the beginning, we were renting movies for $4.99, 99-cent shipping, and just could not figure out how to get traction with consumers. But we were in that dot-com bubble where people were just throwing money at us right and left.
Is that how Reed Hastings got involved in Netflix?
Yeah, Reed, so Mark, who is, in my view, the guy who really came up with the idea, he worked for Reed at Pure, which was a software company. And Reed funded us from the very beginning.
So many companies have that hard, we see so many in our advisory group, so many of our clients in our law firm have that hard leap to find the right product market fit. Can you talk a little bit about that process at Netflix?
Yeah, we backed into it. What we couldn't do is get people, we didn't have a video store that was right in front of people. And if you go back to 98, this is before all the annoying pop-ups that would come up on your computer screen. This was, before bounties were being paid for customer acquisition. And so we would try to figure out, first we tried to figure out how do you get customers. And we did that before really thinking our product wasn't a fit. And because one day we walked into the warehouse in San Jose and we saw 1 million discs, and suddenly this light bulb went on and said, why are these movies sitting here? Why can't they be in our customers' homes? And as a result of that, we started brainstorming, so how do you do that? We'd already paid for them. It's not like they would cost us any more. And from that, we backed into what the biggest problem was with movie rental, and that was the anxiety of having to return the movie. People hated that. People, considered it, a hassle. They would get fined if they didn't return it. So it wasn't like we did it the right way, where you study the customers and say, what's your big problem with this service? We backed into it, and lo and behold, it was like, oh yeah, that is the worst thing. How can we solve that? And that was the all-you-can-eat, return it when you want to, one flat price.
Well, speaking of DVDs, Netflix had 2 giant evolutions. One was going from DVDs to streaming, and I know you still sell these DVDs, and the other was original content. Was it always part of the business plan to move your customers from DVDs to streaming?
Yeah, we very easily could have called it movies by mail in the beginning, because that was our entire business. We started in '97, and it wasn't really till 2006, 2007 till streaming took place. But we called it Netflix because we knew we would be there someday. But we didn't, in those days, you didn't know whether streaming or downloading was going to be the best way to do it. So we always knew that eventually we would get there.
I know you're still selling DVDs. Does that address a different market segment, or what are your plans for your customers, or customers of Netflix at that time? What were the plans in terms of moving those customers over to streaming?
Yeah, it was really brilliant the way that there was a migration of customers from kind of the understandable way to watch movies, which was getting the disc in the mail and giving you free streaming content for the first couple of years. There's still, after that it kind of became a customer acquisition. So you'd get people to try the movies by mail and then slowly but surely migrate them over to streaming. And now that's not even happening. People are going straight to streaming.
Were you surprised by Netflix's bold move into original content after you left?
No. Reed always wanted, Walt Disney was always his, the person he looked up to in the movie business. So you always knew that they would end up there. There's something really, the way Netflix made money, even going back to the DVD days, and it still works in the streaming, is the best customers are those customers that hardly consume anything, but don't quit. And so,
sort of like a gym membership, right?
It's exactly a gym membership. So we would calculate that what were the triggers, what were the kind of leading indicators of someone about to quit, and we would come up with like gifts to them, and we would give them an extra movie or expand their queue size, give them a movie on a higher point in the queue. The exclusive programming is really satisfying that same thing. In the beginning, we wanted to have every movie available. A lot of people talked about the long tail that Netflix was really good at making available. But in the end, it didn't keep subscribers. The fact that you could get a completely unknown French film doesn't affect whether you cancel or not. What did is films you can't get anywhere else, and that led to exclusive content. In fact, today, Netflix is not renewing many deep title, deep catalog deals and putting all that money towards exclusive.
So I have to ask you this, Mitch, as a father of a 15-year-old, is binge video consumption here to stay?
I think what's here to stay is the freedom and the option to consume however you want. That's what everybody wants. They want to decide whether they binge or they pace it out. I'm not a big fan of binge watching, even though I do it myself. I think it's not great from a creative point of view. No longer are there cliffhangers where you have to wait a week. Breaking Bad was so good because you had to wait a week to watch the next episode. But I think what's worse is everybody, I'll bet you, well, maybe not for older episodes, but a lot of people here are on different episodes of various series. So you can't talk with your friends about it for fear of giving away like what's in an episode ahead of them. And so that doesn't maximize the potential. If you work in an office, you can't sit around and talk about the latest episode of House of Cards because you don't know who's seen which episode. So I think it's here to stay just because that's what the internet is all about, is freedom of choice and selection.
Well, speaking of freedom of choice selection, would you comment on how your views on the net neutrality rules and the new rules proposed by the FCC and how they might affect Netflix?
Yeah, the fact that net neutrality is being pursued by the government is a really good thing for Netflix. And while it's all altruistic why they're supporting it, it really helps because if there wasn't, they would have a surcharge. Comcast would have a surcharge for higher bandwidth, and they'd be collecting some of the money ultimately Netflix wants to get. But we need higher bandwidth rates here. We need better speeds. I think the United States is like near the last developed countries in bandwidth. So we just need to, we need to get everybody faster here in the States. You know, South Korea makes us look like we're back on 14.4. So we need a big improvement there.
So you've had a pretty storied career starting Netflix, but I think the second giant thing you did that a lot of people would like to know about, I think people know less about, is your career starting at McDonald's, Redbox, and spinning that out of McDonald's. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I'm sure a lot of you have had big failures in your life and you know, try to push those in the background. But one of my big ones back in the early 80s was a vending machine that rented VHS cassettes. And I came up with it because I had invested in a video store called Kaplan Video in the Bay Area. This is in '82. And it was an all-cash business. This is before the point-of-sale system, you know, with an IBM 286. So cash was just walking out the door. You know, every employee and the owners, you know, my so-called partners, you know, were taking money right and left. And I thought, well, you know, one way to solve this is, what if everything was in a vending machine? And it was one of those ideas that looked really great on paper, but totally, you know, people would look at it and go, yeah, I don't want to do that. So McDonald's in 2002 had their first declining year-over-year sales. And a genius out of France suggested, why don't we rent movies at McDonald's? It forces you to come back a second time. You'll smell the burgers and fries, and you might buy something. So I thought, boy, this is my chance to resurrect a total failure I had in the past. And so we started in 2003, started building that business. Never wanted to do anything but put the kiosks on their properties. But about 2 years into it, the old timers at McDonald's said to us, you know, Ray Kroc would be rolling over in his grave if he knew we were renting R-rated movies, you know, at McDonald's. And of course, they were our best renters. So even in Utah. And so we ended up spinning out and building that business separately.
You've coached, mentored, worked with so many entrepreneurs over the years, and so many people ask, you know, what are the good attributes in an entrepreneur? Tenacity, intellect. But I just would like to ask you the opposite of that question. What tendencies do you think really, or traits don't work for entrepreneurs or entrepreneurship that you've seen in your experience working with people over your career?
Yeah, it's. I wish I could tell quicker than I do than I have. You almost have to work with, you know, somebody a little while before these come out. But there's a couple. One of them is people who are really happy with their life tend to not be that great. You know, at it. So
you're looking for the tortured soul.
I look for the tortured soul. And that comes out, you know, I mean, maybe if that was wrong, that would be wrong.
That's very funny, actually.
So be happy.
So what does that say? Since you're an advisor to Stacy Spikes at MoviePass, what does that say about Stacy?
Stacy is a tortured soul.
What attracted you to MoviePass besides his personal problems?
And it really is Stacy. Stacy is completely determined. I mean, there is nothing that's going to stop Stacy from making MoviePass successful. So that's number one. The second is I'm a total geek around subscription. You know, I just love all the analytics behind it and how you segment customers. But, you know, there is so many good movies in the movie theaters, and the movie theaters are empty most of the time. And so MoviePass really gives people a great opportunity to see really good films that they would not have seen. And it's exactly what we saw at Netflix was people didn't explore and discover new movies because of the kind of a la carte pricing. Oh gosh, it's going to be $5 or $4 at Blockbuster. Oh, then I have to return it. So you get really selective, and you only pick films you absolutely know you're going to like, or likely are going to enjoy, and you might get an insurance backup. But with subscription, you start experimenting, and you learn about film, and you see films you would never do. And I think MoviePass is going to be great in that it opens up lots of new options for people to watch films more often.
From your mouth to God's ears, MoviePass is an ARC portfolio company, one of the funds that I'm a co-founder with Joe Rubin, so I hope you're right about that.
Yeah, I think so.
I wanted to ask you, since you see so many companies, do you know of any companies that could use good legal services?
Well, after seeing your slides, I'm not so sure.
So, what's next for Mitch? What are you doing now?
Well, I have a better balance in my life, so I'm spending a lot more time enjoying kind of not working. So I do a lot of hiking. I failed at a goal last year. My goal was hiking 1,500 miles, and I missed it by 50 miles. But then for work, I'm definitely seeing so many interesting startups, and there's one that I'm really engaged with. It's called Spray, and it's an app that allows you to communicate with people in a specific distance away from you. So if, for example, I wanted to send everybody in this room a presentation or an audio clip, I could say, okay, I'm just going to send it to people within 100 feet. Or if you're if you're a college student, you're in the dorm, and somebody drops off a couple pizzas, and you just want people to come and share it with you who are within 100 feet or 200 feet, you can send a message out that just goes to those people. So I'm doing that. I'm also, there's not a lot of kids here, right? I'm
Just us, don't worry.
I'm really fascinated by the marijuana business, and not but to me it seems there's a lot of similarities with the early days of the video industry, where you could almost do no wrong and you could still make money. It's growing like crazy.
No pun intended.
The trends are all for eventual legalization, and all the people in it are poor operators. Not everybody, but most, and looking for guidance and help and investment. And so it's one of those. It's so much nicer to be. In the last days of the DVD and video business, it's really sad when you see all the video stores closing and then kind of a declining product. And so for me, it's just exciting to be back in a business that is definitely growing.
Growth industry.
It's a growth industry.
I'm sorry. So I think we have time for a few questions before our Monte Carlo night, before Moreland comes back up here to introduce that. Does anybody have any questions before we... George?
Yeah. I'm curious how you price how you price original content versus acquiring something like, I remember reading Friends as being something that almost got paid $1 million an episode. So how do you properly evaluate what's going to be brought from like a Friends versus a House of Cards? That's obviously a very expensive endeavor as well.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've heard about this, but Netflix has hundreds of volunteers who are watching film all day long, and they are rating them based on about 300 to 400 characteristics. And these are themes and subgenre, what year it takes place in, things like that. And then they're using that to evaluate the people who are the most profitable customers. In fact, people who hardly consume at all, but still pay. And they're looking at what do they watch. And from that, what they've learned is that when you have like a Friends episode that you can watch in 6 or 7 other places at multiple other times for free, it doesn't affect someone's retention. So they essentially start it's like A/B testing, and eventually they come up with a kind of a percentage of lifetime value that additional content will represent. But they're borrowing a ton of money to be able to buy it. It's not profitable yet.
Charlie Kemper back here.
So, House of Cards is a 50-minute episode, and it's all released 16 or 13 episodes. Why not break the mold of traditional TV and do 10-minute episodes, 2-hour episodes, and release them once every 4 days, once a month? Why stick to the 13 episode at 15 minutes episode?
Yeah, it's that I think you'll see changing as as attention spans get shorter. You'll start to see those episodes drop. But right now it's a transition. So the production company that's making House of Cards has more decision making in that process than Netflix does. Netflix was not the only bidder on the product. So over time, you'll start to see all kinds of new models in time, and also I think Netflix just announced that they're going to start releasing a film in the theater at the same time that it's on Netflix. I think you'll also start seeing House of Cards in theaters. So you'll start to see a lot of changes, I think, in the near future.
Scott?
Can you talk a little bit about the use of algorithms in Netflix and how you predict what people will like and whether that's really struck cold the way that you intended it?
Sure. It's, it's really, you probably heard about the contest, the $1 million prize contest that was given out for someone who could make a dramatic improvement. The methodology was called collaborative filtering that essentially builds mentor groups. And it's really not all that scientific. Essentially what it does is it looks at the films you rate, and let's say you rate these 20 films exactly the same as 50 other people. Then it says, what other films, so then it's assuming you have roughly the same taste as these 20 other people. But those 20 other people have rated 10 films highly that you haven't seen. So it assumes since you have the same taste as these other people, it's going to assume you're going to like the same films they like. And so that methodology is collaborative filtering. And what happens is it grows organically. So every time there is a new, when I left, there was 5,000 mentor groups. And today it's over 1 million mentor groups of people who have this kind of association. So the science behind it was not all that, it wasn't all that complex.
Quinn?
What is your favorite all-time movie? And what is the highest rented Netflix film or show of all time?
Well, my favorite definitely was not the highest rented. It's Lawrence of Arabia is my favorite. I don't know the answer to the current highest rated, but I can tell you, I know there's not a lot of questions about Redbox, but to show you the difference in the customer segment that Redbox catered to versus Netflix, when I left Redbox, the highest renting movie was Paul Blart Mall Cop. And in fact, we made plaques and gave them out to the marketing team because we did such a good job on that film.
Mark Higgins?
So you must hear all the time, this new company is the Netflix of something. What do you think is the most interesting of those that you've heard?
Well, I think MoviePass is definitely, thanks for that.
Think about us,
A couple the concept, of subscription is really a good one for a number of products, but it doesn't work if the product is not, in the minds of the customer, a commoditized one. If it's one that is, like, exactly what you're getting. So for DVDs, Paul Blart at Blockbuster was the same as Paul Blart at Redbox. It's the same thing. And so and secondly, it has to be something you generally consume on a regular basis. So as long as it fits those qualities, then I think it's something that works. You've seen it for books. There's all kinds of subscription programs, but I think it has to hit those those qualifications.
And
There's a lot of,
I've seen a lot of information about the culture, leadership. Can you talk a little bit about what drove inspiration and the uniqueness of your culture?
Yeah, I really learned a lot. I shared a cube with Reed Hastings for 2 or 3 years, and he's got a really good sense of what makes a real culture. It's not posters, it's not fancy sayings. What it really came down to was, in my view, 3 things. One of them was make sure that everybody knows what's expected of them in a quantitative way. So every individual, it didn't matter who you were, had 2 to 3 quantifiable goals that were monthly. You knew, and everybody in the organization knew where you stood and where they stood. And so knowing exactly what is expected of you, I think, gives you the foundation to then build the fun part of the culture. The second was focus. Anything that ever disrupted the primary goals of the company was gotten rid of quick. And as an example, we, I can't remember, I think this might have been 01 or 02, we realized that the orange envelope had a great advertising value. And we built a whole sales department. The head of sales within months had generated $20+ million in sales. But one time, the advertiser didn't approve the artwork in time, and a whole day of shipment got delayed because we didn't get the envelopes. And he just killed the whole department, shut it down. And so I think focus on keeping everybody focused on your goals, allows you to build the culture. And then people, you just have to keep weeding out, bad eggs. At Redbox, we had a no assholes rule. And so anybody who was a jerk, no matter how well they performed, we got rid of really quick. And we had various ways to figure it out. One of them we copied from Warren Buffett, who, when he's considering hiring someone in the organization, he takes them to a kind of a fast food restaurant, and he watches how they treat the staff. Because so many people are really good at, peer-to-peer or reporting up, but when you watch how they interact with people who some people might consider economically below them, you really get a good sense of what kind of person they are. So I think those 3 things created a foundation where we could do all the fun stuff. So we did things like invested a lot more money in people. Instead of like a typical $2,000 a year investment, we were $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a year and this is back in '02, in education and, parties and things like that. So I think that, but you can't, I've seen so many companies try to build an exciting culture, but they don't have those three foundational points.
So, Matt?
Jamie, I really enjoyed your remarks. I had a question. It was interesting to hear you talk about how you always were thinking of doing streaming, even though you started with the DVD business. I think as investors here in the East Coast, we see a lot of interesting industries that are being disrupted, where there's this innovator's dilemma where the companies are so wedded to their old ways and are not willing to innovate quickly enough, and then they soon become obsolete. And in particular, I think the change from moving from DVDs to streaming was interesting, but the much bigger jump, I think, was for us who are not in Netflix, going into the content creation side. And the idea is that you're actually competing directly with people who you were before just a distribution channel. I'm just curious if you could give us some insights into how, if you were involved at that time, like what the thinking was. I mean, the idea is that was a bold move, and something which I think, when we look here in the East Coast, companies like Kodak and Bausch & Lomb, and companies that didn't innovate quickly enough, like what, and then you look at Netflix, how did you do that?
Yeah, well, a lot of this work was done after I left. A lot of especially the exclusive content. But Ted Sarandos was a guy who I hired. He was my, to show you how far he's gone, because now he's one of the most powerful people in Hollywood. When I owned that chain of video stores, he was my local rep that came around to try to sell me films that I didn't want to buy. So I've stayed close with what's going on, and this is where, there's these metrics, like what are the three most important things that the company has to achieve. It's so easy to, as an executive leadership team, to kind of cloud your judgment based on no one wants to completely throw everything up in the air and change. I'm sure you might have heard this story, but we tried to get Blockbuster to invest in Netflix. They could have bought 50% of the company for $50 million. We tried to get Hollywood Video to invest. Instead, they bought Reel.com. Blockbuster did it themselves. At Redbox, we tried to get Blockbuster to buy half of us for $32 million. And in every case, they all said, why should we do that? We're just as good as you are. We could do it ourselves if we thought it was a good idea. And I think that's just one of the things that clouds successful businesses' judgment in innovating and breaking the mold. And this is really a credit to Reed. Reed has this 90-day rule where if something isn't working dramatically that they were trying, in 90 days he kills it. And he says, hey, if it just improves things 5-10%, who cares? I don't know how you institute that in an organization, because I've also suffered from myself from getting bogged down with accomplishing the day-to-day and missing opportunities. It's a real challenge. I don't know the right way to solve it, but it's definitely an issue.
I think we have time for one last question. Back to the room.
Yeah, so I have a subscription to a digital media streaming service, and I decided to cancel it because I thought it was too expensive. And so after I'd already confirmed cancel, it offered me, if it was half price, would you stay? And so now I stayed. Now it creates a situation where I, as a customer, have a different deal than actually my wife, who also has the same service, is paying twice as much as me. So did you have any situations in either of your businesses where you had different customers with different deals to figure out what was the right price or what was the right model for customers?
Yeah, it's, and so many businesses have that problem when, new customers get a discount and leaving customers get a discount. It's a really hard game to play. You always hope the other ones aren't going to find out about it. But in your case, so you should just merge and just have one membership on your account. It's the same, when, in the early days of Netflix, the way we got awareness was we had this big license plate size coupon in every DVD player box. Well, Sony wanted to have a much better deal than Toshiba, and Toshiba wanted a better deal than any of the others. And we had to do that, and we just hope no one would find out about it. But I don't know the solution. I guess you just, we used to tell grocers at Redbox that, because, we were opening one kiosk every hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3 years in a row. And we would open a location right across the street from one we had for years. And they'd say, what are you doing? I get a percentage of the revenue, now you're cannibalizing it. And so our rehearsed statement was, all boats rise as we get bigger. And that worked for a little while.
Well, I've been informed that David Kidder wants to ask you one last question. Since it's David Kidder, we're going to let him answer one last question.
First, this is the best interview you've had. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Don't stop. Two more questions.
More entrepreneurs, more ballers. Who would you short? Who's going to have their Netflix moment? Who's going to have their Uber moment? I just want your brain on that.
Well, I've lost a lot of money shorting Netflix. It keeps coming back over and over again. So I'm not going to say that. Boy, that is a really good. I don't know. I will think about it and tell you later. Right.
And that's a good segue into Monte Carlo night, where you guys can drink and play and hit Mitch with any of your other questions. Peg and Todd, do you want to come up? They're our sponsors, Moreland Partners, the investment sell-side bank we talked about last night. Thank you, Mitch. They are our sponsors for Monte Carlo night, and they'll tell you all about it.
I'm Peg Jackson from